The gardener of forgotten seeds. Arthur felt like a ghost haunting his own life. For 20 years, he had worked at the same desk in the same office, doing administrative tasks for a large company. It wasn't exciting work, but it was stable. Or at least, he thought it was stable until the email arrived announcing company restructuring. Suddenly, at 48, Arthur was redundant, a word that felt heavy and gray, just like the rainy Tuesday morning he was told his services were no longer needed. The first few weeks passed in a blur of forced relaxation and low-level panic. He updated his CV, applied for jobs that seemed impossibly demanding or depressingly similar to his old one, and spent too much time watching daytime television. The silence in his small apartment felt louder each day. His life, once organized around work schedules and deadlines, now felt shapeless and empty. One afternoon, tired of the four walls of his home, Arthur went for a walk without any particular destination. He ended up near the edge of town, where a patch of green was squeezed between an old railway line and a row of houses. It was the community garden, a place he'd vaguely known existed but had never visited. Hesitantly, he pushed open the squeaking gate. Inside, it was a world away from his quiet apartment. People of all ages were busy working on their plots of land. Some chatted cheerfully, others worked in focused silence. There were rows of bright green lettuces, tall tomato plants heavy with fruit, and colorful flowers attracting buzzing bees. Felt alive, purposeful. Arthur felt even more like an outsider, observing a party he wasn't invited to. He wandered towards the back, where things looked a bit less organized. An old wooden shed stood there, its green paint peeling. Beside it was a neglected patch of earth, overgrown with weeds. Curiosity pulled him towards the shed. The door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled of damp earth and old wood. On a dusty shelf lay several small brown paper packets tied with string. He picked one up. Faded ink, barely readable, hinted at names like Sunset Runner beans and Moonbeam marigolds. They looked ancient. An idea, small and uncertain, began to form in Arthur's mind. He found the garden coordinator, an energetic woman named Maria, and asked about the neglected plot near the shed. "Oh, that one," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Nobody's used it for years. Old Mr. Henderson used to garden there, but he moved away. You're welcome to it if you want to tidy it up." So Arthur claimed the forgotten plot. His first task was clearing the weeds. It was hard physical work, something his office job had never demanded. His muscles ached, his hands got blisters, but slowly, patch by patch, the dark soil appeared. He felt a flicker of satisfaction, something he hadn't felt in weeks. Then came the seeds. He carefully opened the old packets. The seeds looked dry and lifeless. He had no real gardening experience and doubted anything would grow. Probably a waste of time, a familiar voice in his head whispered. But he had plenty of time now. He prepared the soil as best he could, following instructions he found online, and planted the strange old seeds. Days turned into weeks. Arthur visited the garden almost every day. He watered the plot, pulled out new weeds and waited. Nothing happened. Other gardeners' plots were flourishing, bursting with life. His remained stubbornly brown and empty. He felt a familiar wave of disappointment. Maybe he was just destined to fail, whether in an office or a garden. An older woman named Eliza, who tended the plot next to his with quiet dedication, noticed his discouragement. "Gardening teaches patience, Arthur," she said one morning, her voice gentle. "Some seeds take their time. They wait until they're ready. Don't give up on them just yet." Arthur wanted to give up. It felt silly, pinning his hopes on dusty old seeds. But Eliza's words, and the simple routine of visiting the garden, kept him going. He started talking more with the other gardeners, asking tentative questions, sharing a shy smile. He learned about composting from Maria and about deterring slugs from a young student growing herbs. He was still quiet, but he no longer felt like a complete ghost. Then, one unremarkable Thursday morning, he saw it. A tiny speck of green pushing through the soil. He knelt down, hardly daring to breathe. It was real. Tiny seedling. Over the next few days, more appeared. They weren't strong or fast-growing like the modern hybrids in other plots, but they were alive. The plants that eventually grew were unusual. The beans climbed thin poles Arthur provided, producing long, thin pods of a deep purple color he'd never seen before. The marigolds weren't the common bright orange. They were a pale, creamy yellow like moonlight, just as their name suggested. They weren't a huge success in terms of quantity, but they were unique and strangely beautiful. Other gardeners stopped by to look, curious about these old-fashioned varieties. Arthur found himself explaining about the forgotten seeds, about Mr. Henderson, about his own hesitant experiment. He shared the few beans he harvested and gave away small bunches of the pale marigolds. Summer faded into autumn. Arthur hadn't found a new office job yet, but the panic had subsided. He had spent months outside, working with his hands, watching life emerge slowly from lifeless-looking seeds. He had become part of the garden community, sharing small triumphs and troubles with Eliza, Maria, and the others. Standing by his plot one cool evening, looking at the strange, lovely plants that had grown against the odds, Arthur understood something important. He realized he had spent years feeling like a small, unimportant part of a big machine, easily replaced. He thought value only came from big successes or important titles. But the garden had shown him something different. It showed him the quiet power of patience and persistence. It taught him that even things that seem old, forgotten, or insignificant, like dusty seeds, or even a redundant middle-aged man, can still hold potential for growth and beauty. Value wasn't just in the final product, but in the care, the attention, the slow unfolding. He didn't need a grand purpose. Purpose could be found in tending to something small, in nurturing potential, and in simply showing up day after day. He still didn't know exactly what his future held, but he no longer felt empty. He felt like he had planted a seed within himself too, and he was finally ready to wait patiently for it to grow.